Good afternoon, good morning. Welcome to today's webinar, which is all about using your Wacom tablet with Capture One or Wacom, however you say it. So we'll be looking at a few things today, just really sort of my personal experience of using the Wacom and how I've found it easy to work with Capture One and also other applications as well. If this is your first webinar and you're not sure who you're listening to, my name is David. I'm part of the software sales team based out of Copenhagen in Denmark. As usual, we have a 60-minute session, but we'll probably get through it much quicker than that. It's relatively straightforward, so pretty easy to pick up. You are welcome and encouraged to ask questions throughout. If you're on your Mac or PC, at the bottom of your GoToWebinar control panel, you will see the last box is called questions. So put a question in there, that will come straight through to me. If you're on Android or iOS, there's a question mark icon in the top right-hand corner of the screen, and you can ask a question in a similar way. Alrighty, so let us begin. So if I just come out of Keynote for a second, and you should see Capture One on screen. Just bear with me while I just arrange a few monitor bits and pieces, and then we'll be able to get started. So let's just pop that there. You might see the cursor located like so from time to time as well. Now, first thing, let me just bring up my webcam because I just want to show you a few bits and pieces about my Wacom in itself. So in 1 second, if the stars align, we should be able to see my webcam. Yes, we can. Okay, so we'll come back to this in a second, but this is the Wacom we see before you. I'm just going to bring up Wacom's web page as well, and just to essentially show you really what we're going to be looking at today, which is pen tablets. So these Intuos Pro, and I'll briefly mention a little bit about what are they called? The Mobile Studio Pro, and also Cintiq, as James was asking. So first of all, before we sort of get to the products themselves, you might be wondering why Wacom? I mean, my personal reason for using Wacom was really, if I just bring this antiquated device in, was just more out of comfort. So a long time ago, without showing my age, I used to spend sort of 7 or 8 hours a day doing cutting paths around various different objects on a mouse, and it just became sort of untenable to hold a mouse really for that long. So my motivation for using Wacom was, instead of holding a mouse, it was to hold something I feel a lot more ergonomic, which is a pen, because you don't have to grip so hard. It's a relatively light touch to hold a pen. Any of you who haven't considered using a tablet and a pen before, my personal experience is that it's easier than a mouse and faster to use than a mouse, especially for longer periods of time as well. And I should point out, I don't just use this for Capture One. I use this for everything, even from writing emails to editing videos to anything, really. I personally think it's a universal device in that respect. Now, my experience is only with Wacom. I know there's other tablets out there, but I've got no experience whatsoever if they're good, bad, ugly, or whatever. But I think Wacom gives you a pretty good range of products to choose from very high-end stuff to more affordable stuff. So what you're looking at here, this one, I know it's hard to see as it's matte black on a black desk, so we just catch a bit of light there. This is a Wacom Intuos Pro. So if we just bring up the Intuos Pro website, it comes in 2 sizes. This is the smaller of the sizes, so medium and large. If I just bring up this one, Okay, and this is my older Wacom, which is, if you like, the old Intuos Pro model. Now the footprint on the desktop is pretty similar. So it's almost exactly the same size. But this one, the older Intuos, the sensitive area, if you like, the area which is sensitive to the pen and also touch, because you can use these as trackpads as well, is much larger. So you see this is on the old Intuos, so it stopped here. Whereas the bezel, if you like, on the newer one is kind of much bigger. So it's just going out of shot at the bottom of the frame. But it's, even though the desk footprint is much the same, the sensitive area is wider. It's also, the newer one's USB-C, which is nice and convenient, and wireless built in. Whereas before this had this funny little kind of wireless pop-out USB thingy, like so, for plugging into your computer. The reason why I'm talking about that is often I'm asked, well, should I buy a really big tablet or a really small tablet? Surely bigger is best, as we're often told. But I didn't have any issue with using that smaller one. And my particular workspace is set up so that I have two monitors. So you've got the monitor that you're looking at here. So this is my laptop display, but also in front of me, which you can't see. Maybe if I just tilt this up a bit so you get an idea. You see there's a messy desk, and there's also another, and where is it? There's another monitor sitting in front of me as well. So the way it works, and we'll look at the driver in a minute, is that half of my tablet is to one monitor and the other half of the tablet is to another monitor. And even on my smaller tablet, this one here, which had much smaller area, I didn't find that an issue. So don't necessarily think you need to go out and buy a whacking great huge tablet. It's not necessarily the case. Also, you have to consider with a bigger tablet, your hand movements are going to be so much bigger. So I think if you were an illustrator or doing a lot of heavily detailed retouching, then it could make sense to have a bigger surface area. But I think for our kind of photographic applications or using software and for local adjustments, working with layers, which is, again, makes it much easier using a tablet, I happen to think this size is fine. So if budget allows, then I think the Intuos Pro is a very nice system to have. If budget doesn't allow, then if you just look at the Intuos range, let's see, and they're basically sort of smaller, they have less fancy features, not so many levels of pressure sensitivity, which I don't use anyway, so that's not really a big issue for me. Oops, let's just turn my Wi-Fi on. Much less of an issue for me. But again, these are perfectly capable, make really nice little travel tablets as well. So no issues there as well. Okie dokie. So let's go back to the driver for a second. Let's get capture one up on the screen and the driver, like so. And the third and final thing I want to bring in, because it was James who was asking about Cintiq, anything that you see today will apply to Cintiq as well. And if you don't know what a Cintiq is it's basically the same as this, but it also has a display built in, so you're working directly on the image itself, which is pretty cool. And the third and final thing, let's just turn this on for a second. This beast, something that Wacom also does, is tablet computers. So this is basically a Wacom tablet, a display, and a computer all in one. And that actually works really nicely as kind of a mobile tethering solution as well. So anything that you see today is just as relevant for something like this, and also for the Cintiq as well. Let's just put that back behind me. Let's see. Okay, let's start by looking at the driver in itself. So there's also an application. Let's see, let's bring up this Wacom Desktop Center. So this is an app which sort of appeared a little while ago, and you can also use this to set up your tablet, but it essentially just takes you to system preferences. But what is very useful here is that you can back up all your settings to the Wacom cloud. So if you want to, you know, once you've set up your Wacom to how you like, it's a really good idea to back it up, just in case you lose your computer or when you transfer to a new computer, you can re-download all your settings from a local backup. So that's quite handy. And it also gives you an idea if you need to update the driver as well. So they do tend to have relative sort of backups, relatively frequent backups to the driver for compatibility and so on. Okie dokie. A couple of you were asking about AstroPad. I've personally never used it. I've always gone for a dedicated tablet just because I find the ease of getting into the office and plugging it in, you know, straightforward in terms of having to keep my iPad charged or running different apps and so on. I think AstroPad could be a good budget option, but I have to say I don't have any experience to it. I'm afraid, but you know, that may be a good way to sort of test if you think you like using a pen and tablet combination, and then sort of move on to Wacom after that. I know friends of mine have tried a few other apps and had limited success in terms of like the lag of moving the pencil and the cursor moving on screen. So that's also something I personally wouldn't be able to cope with any lag. That would just feel strange. But with Wacom, of course, you've got zero lag. Or if there is any lag, I certainly don't notice it myself. So going on to the driver, this is exactly the same for Mac and PC. So there's no difference here. And it's basically divided by sort of configuring what the pen does, configuring what the functions do here. Oh, it's strange. My driver doesn't want to respond. Okay, I'm going to quit system prefs and just try that again. See if we have more luck this time. Let's see. That's better. Okay, so it boils down to configuring how the pen works and then configuring how the extra functionality works. If I just pick this up, so we've got some express keys as they're called. Just move that a bit closer, catch a bit of light. So we've got some express keys down the left-hand side, something called the touch ring, and some more express keys like so. There's also a switch on the side of the new Pro ones, which allow me to make it touch sensitive. So now with touch on, as you saw that pop up on the screen, I can move the cursor around with the touch as well. So that's handy, especially for me if I leave my office, go up to the house and have my pen in my pocket and then leave it somewhere stupid. It's really handy to have that touch backup as well. Okay, so let's start with the pen. Now, there's very little. If I just set this back to default, this is how it ships like so. I'm just going to change the focus on my webcam to super close. 1 second. Let's go like this. So if I hold this up probably till we're in focus about there. So you can see this on, the pen is like a rocker switch. So you have one button like that, which pushes, and another button like this, which pushes like a rocker switch. Let's just put the focus back to the tablet, like so. So you have two of those actions that you can do. And by default, it's set to right click and double click. Now, I don't find right click and double click particularly useful because right click, the way I work is that ergonomically, and a few people asked about ergonomics this morning, how do I position everything? I have everything very much in front of me. So I have a Wacom tablet, Capture One keyboard, monitor in front of me, as you saw a little while ago, and my left hand stays here on the keyboard, so I can do all the keyboard shortcuts, and then I have my pen in the right hand. So if I want to right click, for example, in a Capture One, then I simply use my control key and right click. So I don't use any of the buttons because I personally have a better use for those buttons. And what I've found is that this one here, the front click, I go to navigation and I set this to pan and scroll. And what this allows me to do is to pan and scroll web pages, the browser. Whoops, let's just come out of that. Thank you. What this allows me to do, if we just go back to Wacom's page, is that I hold the button in on the front of the pen, and then I can scroll up and down quite easily, like so. So it means I don't have to go over to the, this column scroll bar on the right-hand side. I can simply do all of that just by holding the button, no left-handed needed, and just scroll up and down. So that's the first minor little change I do, for example. The top button, we'll come back to that, but I have an application for using the on-screen controls for the top button, or you could set that to right-click, for example. If you didn't want to control click, then we could just right-click, for example, by clicking that button, and then that gives me the right-click options as well. So that's the first basic little thing I should do. I should add, if you want to configure your pen and tablet differently for different applications, then you can do so. So I think that's often a good way to do it, because you might find that application or the way you use the pen in Capture One could be quite different to the way that you use the pen in Photoshop or just browsing the web or something like that. So what we can actually do is make a custom set for Capture One. So if we say plus here, then you'll see currently open applications. I'll say Capture One 11 and say OK. So now everything I do thereafter is only going to be for Capture One. So I've got my pan scroll set up. Eraser, actually there is an eraser on the end of the pen. So in theory you can turn the pen upside down and then erase masks in Capture One or Photoshop and so on. I find it slower to turn the pen around rather than just switch to the erase brush using a keyboard shortcut with my left hand. So again, I don't change anything here. And mapping, this is where we can start to first think about what we can do with the express keys on the left hand side. So mapping always relates to if you're using a dual monitor setup, which most of us are. So by default, if you don't change anything on the Wacom driver, the driver will split up the sensitive area of the tablet, I guess that's the right word for it, into sort of two halves. So the right hand side is going to be doing my monitor that's in front, and then the left hand side is doing my laptop display, which is just kind of over there a bit, which you can just see the corner of my laptop there. So that's how the default works. So when I'm on the right hand side of the tablet, you can't see my cursor because it's on the monitor in front of me, but as I get to roughly this position, you can see my cursor just sneaking in on the right hand side. And generally that's a totally acceptable way to work, but what you can do is you can have some control over how it maps. For example, you can change, do I want to just use monitor 1, monitor 2, or a portion, and so on and so forth. But better than that is where we can first start to investigate what we do with the express keys to actually control how that mapping works. Hold that thought. I'll just answer a question from Wayne, and a couple of you asked about this Capture One keyboard. Yes, it's a dedicated Capture One keyboard. It's just color-coded with various different shortcuts. It's just a visual aid to help you remember all those shortcuts, because some of the more obscure ones which you don't use very often, it's nice to have a visual aid. You can get the keyboard from any of your local Phase One partners. It's available in UK English, US English, and German currently. We're investigating whether to expand that out. So if you are interested in different languages, just please let your Phase One partner know, or drop us a line on social media or a support case or whatever, and we'll know how popular it could be. But it's a great little asset. And in Capture One itself, you'll find that under Edit Keyboard Shortcuts, you'll see that there's specific shortcut sets for the Capture One keyboard. So US, UK, and German. Excuse me. So back to the mapping side of things. So now that we've covered the pen side of things, let's go to functions and look at the first useful feature, I think, for display toggle. So if we go to the third tab, which actually says display toggle here, what this means is that if we set a button, one of the express keys, to display toggle, we can toggle between using the whole area for both monitors. So that's monitor 1 on this side, monitor 2 on this side, or we can have the whole area dedicated to monitor 1 and then the whole area again dedicated to monitor 2. And we can toggle that around. So first of all, if we go to express keys, these indicate, again, these keys down the left-hand side of the tablet, or right-hand side if you're left-handed. And they're just simple push buttons. So you'll see this one here by default is set to display toggle. So what that means, if I give this one a push, like so, now the entire tablet area is dedicated to the monitor that's sitting in front of me. If I push this button again, like so, now it's dedicated to my laptop display over there. So now you can see my cursor. If I just gradually move my hand back and forth, sorry, it's now between the two monitors. If I press display toggle once more, now my, hang on, I'm pressing the wrong one, that's why. No, I'm not. Let's see, display toggle is that one, then it's both, then it's strange, it's missing a display toggle. Did I check something off? Nope. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. So monitor 1, monitor 2. Yeah, sometimes you see, I found this with the Wacom driver, that it doesn't pick up one of the monitors properly. So any oddities like that, tend to just pull the plug or turn it off and fire it back up again. Let's try that again. Say display toggle, express keys, try that again. So that gives me monitor 2. This gives me both of them, and then one more push. Like so. Well, what it's supposed to do is allow me, as you can see, split between CG, so ISO CG, and other, as it says here. It could just be that Wacom, the driver, can't pick up the full spec of this monitor. It was working fine earlier. Sometimes it just needs, the driver needs a restart, like to restart your computer to get it to attach. But what display toggle is supposed to do is allow you to flick the area between both monitors, one monitor or the other monitor. So that's really good if you're working on, say, a dual monitor setup, but you want to temporarily dedicate the entire Wacom surface to a particular monitor, then you can do that. So it's entirely possible. That's what that function is supposed to do anyway. Okay, so that's the first thing that I tend to set up with the express keys. The second thing is precision mode. And again, this relates to perhaps needing a bigger area for some sort of precise work. So when we have a precision mode on, as you can see here, that's my third button. What this does, if I click that, then it changes, as you can see on screen, the whole sensitive area to just this little tiny bit. So if you see my hand now, it gives me sort of super fine control. So if you need to do some very precise masking, whether that be in Photoshop or in Capture One itself, then precision mode can work quite nicely, especially if you're going around some object and you want to be really accurate and you're using local adjustments, then that can be a pretty good way to do it. So that's something which is useful. When you choose precision mode, it's under tablet, precision mode, you're asked how precise you want to be. So ultra fine to fine. So if I move the slider to the left-hand side and say OK, and let's turn precision mode on, then you see it's a much bigger area, like so. But it can be really nice if you are doing local adjustments. It just makes your sort of area much more fluid. Or especially if you don't have super amazing pen control, then it can take that sort of jaggedness out of the edge, which is what Harwell was asking. Why use precision mode as opposed to zooming in on the image you want to work in? Well, it goes down to the real estate, the area of the tablet. So the bigger the tablet, the smoother your actions are going to be. So if you imagine you had a little teeny tiny tablet, let's say as big as my phone, for example, this was my tablet, then when you're making movements, they're going to be much more exaggerated on screen. So by having a bigger area, it makes your movements smoother, but by turning on precision mode, then it just makes our sort of dampens, I guess, what you're doing with your hands, especially if you have it on superfine. Where are we? Tablet, precision mode. Let's go up a notch, say in the middle. Turn precision mode on. Then look at that. So if I wanted to draw around a cloud or something, then I can do that really quite accurately because it's taking the sort of error out of my hand like so. So it just makes you more accurate. Can you move the precision mode area? Good question. I don't know. I don't think you can. No, but when you turn precision mode off, if I move my cursor over here and turn precision mode on, you'll see it's always when you activate precision mode, it's wherever you activate it. So it is handy. Yes, Stephen says, thanks for the tip. It's very useful. Yeah, it definitely will be, especially for those tricky masking subjects as well, depending how much of a god you are with your drawing skills. And you'll find you'll get better. The more you use a tablet, you'll find that you'll be able to draw around things quite nicely, and especially doing things like, annotations as well. So if I try and draw around this cloud, like so with, for example, and then now if let's just clear that, if I turn precision mode on, then basically I can be more accurate like so. So it just allows you that extra finesse. Can you zoom in whilst in precision mode? What, into the image itself? Yeah, I'm pretty sure you could. So if I turn precision mode on, let's just go to 100%, then yes. So you can still do everything in Capture One for sure. Okay, Nicholas was saying, would it be easier to zoom in before activating precision mode? I don't think it makes any difference. So you can still zoom in and out with precision mode on. So I don't think it really matters. Okay, what was next on my list of things to mention? Yes, so we had a look at a couple of things for the express keys. Now remember, these express keys, you can set them to do anything. So you can see that there is modifiers like Shift, Command, Option, Control, and so on. But as I said, for my ergonomics, I have my left hand set up on the keyboard, so I have access to all those modifier keys, and I'm so used to doing that, I didn't think it was really faster to have them on the express keys, because then I've got to move my hand back and forth. But if I'm just using the Mobile Studio Pro, then it's really handy to have those modifier keys there, because that doesn't have a keyboard, so then it makes much more sense. But you can also add clicks down here as well, keystrokes, various different tablet stuff, navigation things, switching to applications like open an application, and so on. So the sky's the limit really with those options there. So if it's a keyboard shortcut, then it works quite nicely. Oh, Esther says, what about for lefties? You're not left out. You'll see here under mapping, orientation, you can say express keys right. So basically all that means here is then that you flip your tablet around, and then it works just perfectly as well. So you just have to tell the driver that you are a lefty in the orientation like so. You can put them at top or bottom. Don't know why you do that. Maybe if you're drawing, I guess if you're an artist and you're drawing like A4 portrait, then you might want to have them at the top or the bottom. Okay, so let's move on to the sort of final thing that you might find useful is, or third and almost final thing, is the touch ring. So let's set this up for Capture One in specific, because you can have different settings for pen and the express functions. Just remember that. So you can have the pen set up in a particular way for some app, and then you can have express key functions set up in particular as well. So if we're going to do a Capture One setup, the touch ring by default is sort of set up for Photoshop. So you can see cycle layers and brush size. But brush size, it's just simply using a keystroke. So if we go into the driver here and look at keystroke, you can see it's square bracket left and square bracket right, which is exactly the right shortcut as it happens in Capture One for changing the brush size. So the middle button, so this middle button here is a toggle. You can see there's an LED light here. So you can change the operation of this into 4 different ways. Because if the LED is lit up in the top left-hand corner, then we're going to be using this function. And if the LED is in the top right-hand corner, we're going to be using this function. So if I click this toggle, so you see the LED move, and then to the next one, and then you get the on-screen reminder as well. So now if I go into Capture One and we take our brush for local adjustments, and I go back and forth, so you just, like an old iPod, if you like, those were the days. Oh, you can't actually see, sorry, on my monitor, I can see Go to Webinar sometimes hides the local adjustment cursor. But trust me, let's just try it now. It does make it bigger and smaller. But Go to Webinar is a pig sometimes and hides the local adjustments brush. But moving your finger around in a circle like so, will actually make your brush bigger and smaller. So you can decide whether you think that's faster than right-clicking and changing it in the traditional sense when you're using a brush, but it might be good for you guys. Secondly, if we look at this image has lots of layers, for example, and a handy shortcut is that we can cycle through layers. So by using colon and apostrophe. So if I go click these shortcut keys, then I can move up and down through the layer stack. Now, because the touch ring can be programmed to do any kind of keystroke, if in Capture One we do the same thing, so I'll say keystroke, we're going to have semicolon here and apostrophe here. So just to show you how to program that, you just hit clear, hit the key that you want to have, give it a name. In this case, it's cycle layers, and we can say OK. So now if I toggle to this guy, cycle layers, and then use my finger on the touch wheel, you can see we're cycling up and down like so. If it kind of goes a bit berserk when you do this, you can actually moderate how fast the key taps are. Because you can imagine this is just basically like somebody going tap, 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 tap on the right key. So if it's a bit too crazy, like if I put this up to fast and then try and do it, whoa, like so, it's impossible to have any control on it. So if we go to slow and go back, then you can see it works much better, for example. So you can moderate that as well. You can use this for zooming and rotating and all kinds of stuff. Again, personally, I tend to deviate towards keyboard shortcuts, but it's quite nice to be able to cycle layers as well, for example. Just checking my notes. And then the last thing, which you can take away to sort of think amongst yourself, is something called on-screen controls. So once again, if you don't have a Capture One keyboard, or you don't want to buy a Capture One keyboard, but you struggle to remember shortcuts, then this is a good way of making shortcuts visual. So for example, let's go to on-screen controls, and I'm going to make a new set by hitting plus for Capture One. So I'll call this Capture One panel. and you've got various different panel sizes, but I'm going to go for the giant panel, why not, and say OK. So this basically gives me this grid-like thing, which we can overlay onto Capture One, and this can do any keyboard shortcut or combination of keyboard shortcuts. So let's say we want one that does edit with, so to edit with into Photoshop. So I can pick a key, and first of all, I need to check in Capture One if there is a shortcut for edit with. So if I go to File, Edit with, there's no current keyboard shortcut, so I need to define one. So if I go to Edit Keyboard Shortcuts and then go to Edit With, like so, and I'm going to use Command E, why not? Seems like a good choice. So now if I press Command E on my keyboard, the Edit With panel comes up like so. So let's just cancel out of that, go back to my Wacom driver, and I'm going to assign the same keystroke, which let's clear that, which is going to be Command E, and say OK. Oh, I need to give it a name as well. So let's say keystroke. This is going to be edit with, like so. Okay, 1 second. Yeah, edit with. But now I need to use something on the Wacom or the pen to get that on-screen control to come up. So if I go back to my Pro Pen, and then what I'm going to do is say the top button, I'm going to set that to on-screen control and the Capture One panel, like so. So now if I tap the top button in Capture One, this Capture One panel comes up, and then I've got edit with, like so. So nice little handy shortcut. And we could add anything else there. So if I go back to functions, let's also change this one and make this one do another keystroke, which is Command D for process an image. Okay, like so. So now if I tap, I'm tapping the top button here. So if I tap that, up comes the menu, and then I can say process. Now Capture One will process that image out. So again, if you struggle to remember shortcuts, and a common one I always forget is like along the top here, which you can just see off screen, are all the different counter resets. So capture counter reset, import counter reset, rename counter reset, output counter reset, export counter reset. Now I can never remember which is which, so that would be, you know, like a really nice case to put all your counter resets here, for example, so you knew exactly what they did. Or any other shortcut that you quite can't remember, like making a new variant, for example. I can never remember which is which. So new variant is F2. Clone variant is F3. So let's do that, for example. So let's make this one, keyboard keystroke, clear. We can add F2, like so. Give it a name. I've forgotten what F2 did already. What the heck was it? New variant. New variant. And say OK. And now if I tap my top button, let's just bring up the browser. New variant. There we go. Done. Like so. So super speedy, because I can never remember if F2 or F3 is new or clone. So something like that can work really nicely. Let's see. David says it'd be great if you could edit the photo rather than setting up shortcuts. Well, this webinar was mostly about shortcuts. What I mean, really, the benefit of using a pen for is for local adjustments. And the one thing that I will say on that, David, is that if I right-click to bring up this panel, you will see a checkbox here called Use Pen Pressure. And what that correlates to is the opacity. Now, personally, I use flow a lot more when doing local adjustments, and for that we can't link pen pressure to flow. It only links to opacity. It would be nice if you could configure pen pressure, but that's not possible in Capture One at the moment. What I would say, David, if you're interested in sort of more of the editing process, then if you go back and find the part about local adjustments, then really that's where this comes into play, because if you're drawing masks, and if I just grab a brush, for example, let's just do a new layer. Grab a brush, right click, full opacity. If we're drawing masks on our image, for example, then it's much faster to draw a mask and be, you know, faster and smoother with a pen than it is if you're using a mouse, for example. So that's the reason why primarily my job is much easier on working with images, because it's so much faster and more fluid to draw complex masks. So have a look at previous local adjustment webinars if that's, you know, what you're interested in. Finally, who was asking, oh, Philip says, I put the express keys at the top. I have the tablet vertical to match the way my screens are arranged. There we go. So learn something new every day. Alan says, are there different kind of tips? Yes, actually. I replaced one this morning. I'm just looking for it, but it's tiny and black, and I can't find it. So I'll show you why it's good to replace them. I'm just going to change the focus again. So if I hold up the pen tip, they're very sort of tiny little replaceable tips, and they do wear out. You'll find that they end up with an angled edge on them. And as I said, I replaced one just not yesterday, I think, because it was starting to get quite an evil angle on it. Each Wacom comes with a base, and then what you'll find is, I'm just going to undo this, I'll change focus if I need to. Inside the base for the Intuos Pro, you'll see you have, oops, new tips hidden inside there. Last time I did a Wacom webinar, someone was like, no way, I had all these spare tips, and I didn't realize it. So that's what the new holder looks like. The old holder, just put this back together. This weighs a ton, incidentally. So it's basically, let's just change the focus again for you. It basically allows you to, where is it? Put the pen in like so, or put the pen in like so. I never use it generally. I just tend to sort of toss the pen down on the side, and then I can pick it up pretty quickly. Certainly no slower than a mouse anyway. The old Wacom holder looked like this. And incidentally, you can open that up, and it had a bunch of tips inside. There are some slightly different ones. I haven't gone away from changing from the default, but you see there are ones which has a little tiny spring in it, and that just moderates the pressure sensitivity in a different way. But as I don't really use the pressure sensitivity aspect of it, then there's not much need for that. So that's the old style nibs. You see they're quite thick. To take them out, you can use your teeth, which is not recommended, or you can do it the proper way, which is in the bottom of the holder, there's a little tiny hole. So we just put that in and then pull the pen back. And this is where it pings across the office. Then your nib comes out like so. Oh, now I'm just, there's a little tiny nib, and then you can just slot it back in. So as I said, teeth is one way, or doing it the other way is much more acceptable. So then we can just put that back in. They never fall out or anything, so you don't have to worry about that. In the old style holder, if you didn't know it was there, there's actually a little circular pair of metal tweezers in the middle, which I have clearly lost, and then you can use that to pull out the nibs as well. But they do wear out. Say I replaced one yesterday, and I think, how long did that last? Trying to remember when I got this tablet. I don't know, 6 months ago or something like that. So yeah. Cameron says, I've no idea there were spare tips. Yes, someone else. Excellent. So yeah, there's always that little hidden gem. So don't go out and buy tips if you don't need it. Is there a Wacom setting to enable a long press, for example, brush options? It should work anyway. So if I go over here anyway and click, then you see it pops up. So it does behave like a long press, as you can see. Same for any of those menus like crop, etc. The pan tool, as long as you click in the right spot, then you do get the sub context pop up. Let's see. Pascal is saying, are there any future plans with iPad Pro as a tablet like Capture Pilot? Well, I think Capture One is, a pretty deep application. I'd be very surprised if we could, my personal opinion, port that over to the iPad Pro. If you want to use Capture One on a tablet, a far better investment would be a Wacom Mobile Studio Pro, for example. Dell has some touch-sensitive Windows equipment. Microsoft has the Surface Pro. All of those are really much more competent machines compared to an iPad. You can't connect anything to an iPad. You can't, attach peripherals. It's quite limited in that fact. They're beautiful, but I think they sort of have limited professional use. Okay, so I think that pretty much, how long was that? Let's see. That pretty much draws us to a close. So that was 45 minutes as opposed to an hour. But really, I think the takeaway from this is that even if you pulled your nice brand new shiny Wacom out the box and did nothing, I personally think your experience will be pretty good without moving anything away from default, which is good. My one change, which I've always told to people, is this pan scroll idea. I just think it makes it much easier using the pen and tablet combo in any application, not just Capture One. And then all the other stuff around that is kind of more of a bonus. So give it a try. I would say that if you're new to using a tablet, that the first 24 hours will probably drive you crazy. You have to get used to sort of pushing the cursor around. With a mouse, you tend to do, if I bring the mouse in, you tend to do this at action and like pushing around like that. Whereas with the tablet and a pen, you're actually putting the cursor where you want to have it. There is a setting in the driver where you can make it behave like a mouse, but I think that's wasting the whole point of having a pen and tablet, because then you can't really use it what it's meant for. And then if you do get into drawing, then it's much nicer for drawing, and for local adjustments, it's much easier for making masks, and it's better for your health as well. Can I use my fingers instead of the pen? Yes, there's actually a gazillion touch options you can do, as you can see. So if you turn on touch, there's a switch on the side on these. Then basically you can do all the sort of various different touch stuff. So loads of things, which I haven't even sort of scratched the surface off. But as I said, when I forget my pen, or I can't find it, or I left it in a coat pocket or something like that, or it's behind my ear and I've forgotten about it, then it's nice to have touch, because it just gives you an extra backup as well. But yes, you can do all of that stuff with it. And it's also good if you're working in the studio and someone looks at you with a strange face when you say, hey, you can use this pen, and they think, oh, I don't know how to do that. Just put touch mode on, and then anybody can swipe through images and so on. Because I think with the touch on, if I go over to, say, this area, then I can scroll up and down with 2 fingers. So it behaves just like a Mac touchpad. See, we can always go next image and previous image with a 2-finger swipe, like so. So it's pretty powerful. I just haven't found much of a need to go through it. But if you're using something like the Wacom Mobile Studio Pro, you can actually do both. You can have the pen in one hand, and what I do on the Mobile Studio Pro is that I put the Capture One tools on the right-hand side and the browser on the left. So that would be View, Place, Tools, Right. So I can use the pen on with my right hand to, adjust tools and things. And then I can use touch gestures for scrolling up and down, for example, with the, did I turn it back off? Touch on. So then I can use touch gestures for scrolling up and down. So you can use pen and hand at the same time, which is pretty neat, directly on the screen. So if you're interested in the Mobile Studio Pro, I would thoroughly recommend it. Alrighty, let's see the last questions. It'd be great to see how it works on the Cintiq Pro. It's pretty much the same William. It's like the driver is the same, the settings are the same, but as I said, my setup is just that I put the tools on the right hand side as I'm right-handed, because otherwise you're then having to put your whole arm, if you like, over the screen to get to the browser on the left-hand side. So it makes more sense to switch the tools on the right on the Mobile Studio Pro. Do I take the Wacom on the road? Yes, always do. That's why I have, this is the travel Wacom. So the older one is the travel Wacom. That's the one that's always in my backpack. I don't go anywhere without it. I'm distraught if I forget it. So I always take that one. And as I say, I'd be lost without it, to be honest. Say again how you set up the pen scroll. That's simple. Let's just go to Pen, Pro Pen, and just change navigation to pan scroll. There's all kinds of other stuff like zoom in and zoom out. I've got no idea what tumble is. What does tumble do? Don't know. Nothing, it seems, in Capture One. If anyone knows what tumble is, please let us know. But pan scroll, and I set it to a fast scroll speed. Is there a Wacom tablet that you recommend for editing and using slideshows for clients? Well, I think even the lower price Intuos, so this one, not the Pro, I'm pretty sure this is touch as well. Let me check. Photo, video, let's see, blah, blah, blah. Let's see, I'm not sure if it, oh, it is touch, yeah, see, Creative Pen and Touch Tablet. So in the studio, again, if someone's alien to using a pen, then they can just use it for touch. Yeah, yeah, Weston says, yes, Intuos offers touch function. So it's a great dual-in-one. Oh, Tumble is specific to 3D application, like tumbling 3D objects. Ah, of course. Well spotted. Thanks, Weston. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, many thanks for your time today. I hope that was all useful. Normally at this point in the explanation, I'll talk about what's going on next week, but I'm away next week. So I'll be back on the 8th of March. That webinar is going to be about, because I've only just decided, don't tell anyone, last minute decisions. That webinar is going to be about rating and tagging and filtering and all that kind of stuff. So that's what's going to come up for the next webinar. But that will be in the follow-up email, which you'll get possibly Monday, I would think. And that means you can sign up for the next webinar. If you want to find your local Phase One partner, if you're interested in the keyboard, just go to phase1.com. and you can grab the Find Local Partner link, which is at the top of our website. And that way you can just find your local partner and inquire about the Capture One keyboards as well. Alrighty. The rough price for the keyboard, that's a damn good question. It's 100 and something euros off the top of my head. So 100 plus euros for the keyboard. It's Mac only, as a couple of you asked. There's no reason why you can't